The Sea of Monsters by Rick Riordan, an immersive summary. The darkness pressed against Percy's mind like a suffocating blanket as sleep dragged him into a world where terror wore familiar faces. He dreamt Grover was running from monsters. The dark shadows looked like claws trying to grab him. The dream clung to Percy even as morning light filtered through his window, leaving him with a gnawing anxiety that twisted in his stomach like a living thing. His last day at yet another school should have felt like freedom, but instead it carried the weight of uncertainty. Camp Half-Blood loomed in his thoughts, that sanctuary where demigods like him could find safety and purpose, yet Percy couldn't shake the feeling that even that refuge might not be enough anymore. Everyone at school was excited for summer vacation, so the halls were loud, but Percy felt sad and walked quietly. He couldn't stop thinking about Grover's scary dream face. The gymnasium erupted into the controlled mayhem of dodgeball, red rubber spheres flying through the air like crimson meteors. Percy barely registered the game until he noticed something wrong. Several of his classmates moved with an unnatural grace, their eyes holding a predatory gleam that made his demigod instincts scream warnings. When they began to change, their human disguises melting away like wax to reveal the towering, cannibalistic forms of Laestrygonian giants, the gymnasium transformed from a place of innocent competition into a hunting ground. Chaos erupted as the monsters revealed their true nature, their massive forms dwarfing the terrified students who scattered like leaves before a hurricane. Percy's heart thumped hard. He saw he was who they wanted. They looked at him, waiting ages for this. Just when the giant's massive hands reached for him, salvation arrived in the form of Annabeth, her blonde hair flying as she burst into the gymnasium with the fierce determination of Athena's daughter. Beside her stood Tyson, whose innocent demeanor belied the protective strength that would prove crucial in the battle to come. As the three of them faced the monstrous threat together, Percy realized that his nightmares were bleeding into reality, and the safe boundaries between his ordinary life and his dangerous heritage had finally, irrevocably, collapsed. The chaos in the gymnasium left Percy's world tilted on its axis, reality fracturing like broken glass as Annabeth pulled him and Tyson through the maze of screaming students and debris. Her gray eyes, usually calculating and calm, held an urgency that made Percy's stomach clench with dread. As they fled the carnage, she explained in breathless fragments how the monsters had been tracking him, drawn by his growing power like sharks to blood in the water. Each word felt like another weight added to Percy's shoulders, the realization that his mere existence endangered everyone around him. The revelation about Tyson struck Percy like a physical blow, reshaping everything he thought he understood about his gentle friend. When Annabeth spoke the truth that Tyson was a Cyclops, one of the ancient children of the sea, Percy felt his world shift again. The boy he'd known as clumsy and kind-hearted was something far more extraordinary and dangerous than anyone had suspected. Yet as Percy looked into Tyson's single eye still filled with the same innocent loyalty, he realized that friendship transcended species, and the bond they'd forged in shared loneliness remained unbroken. The Grey Sisters' taxi materialized from the urban chaos like something from a fever dream, its ancient occupants sharing one eye and one tooth between them as they navigated traffic with supernatural recklessness. The journey became a white-knuckled nightmare of near misses and divine intervention, the sisters bickering over directions while Percy gripped the seat and prayed to gods he was only beginning to understand. Through the grimy windows, he watched the mortal world blur past, each mile carrying him further from the life he'd known and closer to a destiny that felt too large for his 16-year-old shoulders. Camp Half-Blood should have meant sanctuary, but as they crested Half-Blood Hill, Percy's hopes crumbled like ancient parchment. The bronze bulls of Colchis, breathing fire and destruction, had transformed the peaceful entrance into a battlefield. Their mechanical roars echoed across the valley as they trampled everything in their path, their eyes glowing with murderous intent. In that moment of crisis, Tyson's true nature blazed forth like a revelation, his immense strength finally unleashed as he grappled with the metal beasts. Above them all, the sea's claim manifested in a shimmering trident above Tyson's head, Poseidon's acknowledgment of his Cyclops son burning bright against the smoke-filled sky. Percy watched in awe and terror as his friend transformed from outcast to hero, realizing that their brotherhood now extended beyond friendship to the unbreakable bonds of divine blood. The sanctuary Percy had fought so desperately to reach revealed itself as a fortress under siege, its magical defenses crumbling like sand castles before an inexorable tide. Thalia's pine tree, the ancient sentinel that had protected Camp Half-Blood for 7 years, stood dying at the crest of the hill. Its once vibrant needles had turned sickly yellow, and the bark wept golden sap like tears from a wounded god. The poisoning of the tree sent ripples of dread through the camp, for everyone understood the terrible truth. Without Thalia's protective spirit, the borders that kept monsters at bay were failing, thread by precious thread. Into this chaos stepped Tantalus, a figure from nightmare who wore authority like a poorly fitted mask. Where Chiron had ruled with wisdom earned through millennia, this new activities director brought only cruelty wrapped in bureaucratic pleasantries. The centaur's exile felt like losing a father, and Percy watched helplessly as the man who had guided countless heroes was banished for crimes he never committed. Tantalus's arrival coincided with the camp's darkest hour, his presence seeming to accelerate the decay that threatened everything the demigods held sacred. The Stymphalian birds descended during what should have been a celebration, their bronze beaks and razor-sharp feathers turning the chariot races into a massacre of metal and screaming horses. The sky darkened with their wings as they dove like living arrows, each strike precise and deadly. Percy felt the camp's terror as children who had faced hydras and hellhounds found themselves cowering beneath picnic tables, while the birds' metallic shrieks drowned out even the bravest war cries. The attack served as a brutal reminder that their sanctuary had become a trap, its weakened borders now inviting every monster with an appetite for demigod blood. That night, Percy's dreams carried him across impossible distances to a cave where his satyr friend Grover faced horrors beyond imagination. The bad dream was very clear. Grover was stuck near Polyphemus, a cyclops. The cyclops' eye was like a hot fire, and his voice was a loud rumble. Percy woke with his heart hammering against his ribs, the desperate bleating of his friend echoing in his ears like a prayer for salvation. But within that terror lay a seed of hope, for Annabeth's brilliant mind had connected the fragments of prophecy and legend, recognizing that the Golden Fleece, the very prize that lay within Polyphemus's reach, possessed the power to heal Thalia's tree and restore the camp's failing magic. Yet even as they grasped this lifeline of possibility, cruel fate intervened with Tantalus's decree. Clarisse, daughter of Ares and Percy's longtime rival, would lead the official quest to retrieve the fleece. The irony cut deep. The solution to their salvation dangled just beyond reach, assigned to someone whose hatred for Percy burned almost as fiercely as her desire for glory. As Percy watched Clarisse accept her quest with grim determination, he felt the familiar weight of destiny settling on his shoulders once more, knowing that whether through official channels or desperate rebellion, his path would lead him toward the sea of monsters and the impossible rescue of both his friend and his home. The night air crackled with anticipation as Hermes materialized before Percy, his divine presence both comforting and unsettling. The messenger god's hands moved with practiced grace as he bestowed precious gifts upon the young demigod, magical items that would prove essential in the perilous journey ahead. Each artifact hummed with ancient power, their significance weighing heavily in Percy's palms as he accepted the divine assistance with a mixture of gratitude and trepidation. Under the cover of darkness, the trio made their daring escape from camp's protective boundaries. The moonlight danced across the restless waves as magnificent hippocampi emerged from the depths, their horse-like forms cutting through the water with supernatural grace. Percy, Annabeth, and Grover clung to the mythical creatures' backs as they surged toward their destination, the imposing silhouette of the Princess Andromeda rising from the black waters like a floating fortress. The cruise ship's deck gleamed under the pale starlight, its pristine appearance masking the darkness that lurked within. Luke stepped from the shadows, his once familiar face now bearing the cold marks of betrayal. The revelation hit Percy like a physical blow as Luke's true allegiance was laid bare, his service to Kronos, the ancient titan whose malevolent presence seemed to seep from every corner of the vessel. The Golden Fleece, that beacon of hope they had risked everything to find, was to become an instrument of resurrection for the most terrible enemy of the gods. chaos erupted as the full scope of Luke's treachery became clear. The ship transformed from sanctuary to trap, its corridors echoing with the sounds of pursuit. With hearts pounding and adrenaline coursing through their veins, the trio fought their way through the maze of decks and passageways. The lifeboat became their salvation, a fragile vessel of escape bobbing precariously against the massive cruise ship's hull. As they tumbled into its modest confines and pushed away from the Princess Andromeda, the weight of their narrow escape and the terrible knowledge they now carried settled upon them like a shroud, forever changing their understanding of the war brewing between the ancient powers. The sea stretched endlessly before them, its surface deceptively calm as Percy, Annabeth, and Grover navigated their small lifeboat deeper into the treacherous waters of the Sea of Monsters. Luke's betrayal made everything sad, but they still needed to get the fleece first. The ocean seemed to sense their urgency, its currents growing more violent as they ventured further from the familiar safety of the mortal world. Without warning, the water around them began to churn and bubble ominously. The sea erupted in a fountain of spray and terror as the Hydra burst from the depths, its multiple serpentine heads weaving through the air like deadly ribbons. Each head showed pointy bad teeth in the sun, and old eyes wanted food. The small lifeboat rocked violently as the monster circled them, its massive coils creating whirlpools that threatened to drag them into the abyss. Just as hope seemed lost, the thunderous roar of engines cut through the chaos. The CSS Birmingham, a Confederate ironclad that had no business existing in modern times, emerged from the mist like a ghost from history. Clarice, daughter of Ares, stood at its helm with the fierce determination of a true warrior, her arrival turning the tide of battle as the ship's cannons blazed against the mythological beast. Victory proved fleeting as they sailed deeper into the heart of the Sea of Monsters. The water ahead began to swirl in an impossible spiral, and the air itself seemed to scream with ancient malice. Charybdis, the great whirlpool, yawned before them like the mouth of Tartarus itself, while across the narrow strait, six-headed Scylla writhed from her rocky perch. The Birmingham, brave vessel though it was, found itself caught between these legendary terrors. Metal groaned and twisted as Charybdis's inexorable pull dragged the ship toward destruction, while Scylla's head struck like lightning, her teeth finding purchase in the ironclad's hull. In the final, catastrophic moments, an explosion of steam and metal fragments painted the sky orange and black. Through the smoke and chaos, Tyson's sacrifice became apparent. The gentle Cyclops had given everything to try to save his friends, his form disappearing into the maelstrom as the ship broke apart around them. Battered and heartbroken, Percy and Annabeth found themselves washed ashore on a mysterious island where flowers bloomed in impossible colors, and the very air shimmered with enchantment. Circe, the legendary sorceress, welcomed them with honeyed words and a smile that promised both salvation and doom. Her palace gleamed like spun gold in the afternoon sun, its gardens filled with creatures that seemed strangely familiar yet wrong, as if they had once been something else entirely. The witch's magic wove around Percy like invisible chains, and despite Annabeth's desperate warnings, he found himself transformed into a small, helpless guinea pig, his human consciousness trapped within a furry prison. Only through cunning and the power of Hermes' gifts did they manage to escape Circe's island, leaving behind its deceptive beauty for the honest dangers of the open sea. The Siren's island rose from the waves like a graveyard of dreams, its shores littered with the bones of sailors who had succumbed to that fatal song. As their makeshift raft drifted past, the enchanting melody began to weave its spell, promising each listener their heart's deepest desire. The voices called with the sweetness of honey and the power of prophecy, offering visions of glory and knowledge that mortal minds could barely comprehend. Yet they pressed on, their determination stronger than temptation, until finally the monstrous silhouette of Polyphemus's island loomed before them. The Cyclops' domain squatted in the water like a malformed giant, its rocky peaks shrouded in mist and mystery. Somewhere within that forbidding landscape lay the Golden Fleece, but between them and their prize stood one of the most feared monsters in all of Greek mythology, and the final, most dangerous trial of their quest through the Sea of Monsters. The forbidding island of Polyphemus rose from the sea like a malevolent fortress, its jagged cliffs and sulphurous caves promising death to any who dared approach. Percy and Annabeth crept through the shadows of the rocky terrain, their hearts pounding with a mixture of determination and terror. The very air seemed to vibrate with the Cyclops' presence. Each thunderous footstep that echoed from deep within the cave system sent tremors through the ground beneath their feet. As they navigated the treacherous path toward the monster's lair, the landscape itself seemed hostile, with razor-sharp stones and hidden crevices that could swallow an unwary demigod whole. The entrance to Polyphemus's cave yawned before them like the mouth of Hades itself, reeking of sulfur, old bones, and the musk of an ancient predator. Deep inside, it was bad. Grover was in a cage, legs waving. Clarice was stuck with chains too strong to break. The golden fleece glowed with divine radiance from its perch high above, tantalizingly close yet impossibly distant. Polyphemus himself was a mountain of flesh and fury, his single eye gleaming with cruel intelligence as he lumbered through his domain, savoring the anticipation of his next meal. The friends exchanged desperate glances, knowing that one wrong move would mean certain death. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm them, a miracle emerged from the shadows. Tyson, beloved brother and gentle giant, stepped into the flickering torchlight very much alive, his massive form bearing the scars of his underwater ordeal, but his spirit unbroken. The reunion was electric with joy and determination. No longer would they face this monster as frightened children, but as a united force of demigod fury. The battle that followed shook the very foundations of the island as Tyson's incredible strength matched against Polyphemus's ancient rage, while Percy and Annabeth worked with desperate precision to free their captured friends. Stone chips flew like deadly shrapnel, and the Cyclops' roars of pain and fury echoed across the sea of monsters. With the golden fleece finally in their grasp, its warm glow pulsing with healing magic, the heroes made their harrowing escape as Polyphemus's cave began to collapse around them. Boulders crashed down like meteors while the enraged Cyclops hurled massive stones that whistled through the air with lethal intent. They ran as if the Furies themselves were at their heels, the precious fleece clutched tight against Percy's chest, its divine power already beginning to heal their wounds and restore their strength. As their small vessel pulled away from the crumbling island, Polyphemus's final earth-shaking roar of defeat followed them across the waves, a sound of pure, primal frustration that would haunt their dreams for years to come. The golden fleece was theirs at last, and with it the hope of saving Camp Half-Blood and all the young demigods who called it home. The sweltering heat of Miami pressed against them like a living thing as Percy and his companions finally reached their destination, unaware that their greatest trial awaited. The city's glittering skyline reflected off the harbor waters, but beneath its tourist-friendly veneer lurked a danger more sinister than any monster they had yet faced. Luke had been waiting, his trap perfectly laid, and when he finally revealed himself, it was with the cold satisfaction of a hunter who had cornered his prey after a long chase. The betrayal cut deeper than any celestial bronze blade. Luke, once a hero Percy had looked up to, now stood before them transformed into something unrecognizable, his eyes burning with a zealot's fervor, his voice dripping with promises of a new world order. The capture was swift and efficient, their weapons useless against the overwhelming force Luke commanded. As they were dragged aboard the Princess Andromeda, the massive cruise ship that served as Kronos' floating fortress, Percy felt the weight of his failures pressing down upon him like the depths of the ocean itself. But even in the darkest moment, when all seemed lost and Luke's victory appeared complete, Percy refused to surrender. With desperate ingenuity, he summoned an iris message, the rainbow goddess's gift cutting through the ship's magical defenses like a beacon of hope. Before Luke could silence him, Percy's voice rang out across the mystical communication network, exposing the full scope of the betrayer's treachery to Camp Half-Blood and anyone else who would listen. The words tumbled out in a rush. Luke's alliance with Kronos, the threat to Olympus, the location of their prison ship. The rescue came like thunder across clear skies. Chiron's war cry echoed across the harbor as the party ponies charged onto the Princess Andromeda, their hooves clattering against the deck plates in a rhythm of salvation. The ship exploded into chaos as celestial bronze met monsterhide, as arrows sang through the air and heroic shouts mingled with inhuman roars. In the midst of the battle, Percy caught sight of his mentor-wise Chiron, whose gentle teacher's demeanor had given way to the fierce warrior he truly was, his bow singing death to Luke's minions. The rescue was everything Percy had hoped for, and more, a reminder that even in their darkest hour they were not alone. As they escaped the Princess Andromeda's burning decks, Percy felt the bitter taste of victory, tinged with the knowledge that this was merely the beginning of a war that would shake the very foundations of their world. The morning sun cast golden ribbons across Camp Half-Blood as Percy and his companions returned from their harrowing odyssey, the legendary Golden Fleece cradled like a precious newborn in their arms. The camp that greeted them bore the scars of their absence. Thalia's pine tree stood withered and brown atop Half-Blood Hill, its dying branches a stark reminder of how close they had come to losing everything. But as Percy approached the ancient tree with reverent steps, the fleece began to pulse with an otherworldly warmth, its golden threads shimmering as if woven from captured sunlight itself. The moment the fleece touched Thalia's bark, magic erupted like a symphony of life returning to the world. Green shoots burst forth from dead wood, leaves unfurled with the enthusiasm of 1,000 spring mornings, and the tree's canopy spread wide once more, casting protective shadows over the camp below. The magical borders snapped back into place with an almost audible sigh of relief, their invisible barrier strengthening until even the most persistent monsters would think twice before approaching. Percy watched in wonder as color flooded back into the landscape. Flowers bloomed in impossible profusion, the strawberry fields regained their lustrous red gleam, and even the lake seemed to sparkle with renewed vitality. In the days that followed, Camp Half-Blood transformed into a place of celebration and healing. The dining pavilion echoed with laughter as campers shared tales of courage and close calls, their voices carrying the particular joy of those who had faced darkness and emerged into light. Capture the Flag resumed with renewed enthusiasm. The woods rang with the clash of training weapons, and the Canoe Lake once again became a battleground for aquatic supremacy. Yet even amidst the revelry, Percy felt the bittersweet pang of change when Tyson announced his departure for Poseidon's underwater forges, his Cyclops heritage calling him to learn the ancient arts of divine smithcraft beneath the waves. As his half-brother disappeared beneath the lake's surface with a splash that sent ripples to every shore, Percy understood that their victory had come at the price of transformation. The camp was healing, stronger than ever before, but the innocence of their earlier days had been left behind on the Princess Andromeda's burning decks. It sat there telling how they won. Bigger fights are still to come. In the peaceful twilight hours, as the campers gathered around the bonfire singing ancient songs, Percy could almost forget the weight of prophecy and destiny that pressed against his shoulders, almost, but not quite. The Golden Fleece pulsed with an energy that defied mortal understanding as it made contact with Thalia's withered pine, and what happened next would forever change the delicate balance of Camp Half-Blood. The ancient magic woven into those shimmering threads had been crafted by gods themselves, designed to heal and restore life. But divine power rarely knows restraint, and the fleece's essence surged far beyond its intended purpose. As the tree's branches burst forth with new growth and the camp's protective borders blazed back to life, something deeper stirred within the bark, something that had been sleeping for 7 long years. The resurrection began as a whisper, a subtle shift in the tree's heartwood that only the most magically sensitive campers might have noticed. But whispers have a way of becoming roars when divine forces are involved. The fleece's power, intoxicated by its success in reviving the pine, delved deeper into the tree's essence, seeking the spark of life that had originally transformed a dying daughter of Zeus into protective wood. What it found was not just a tree spirit, but the dormant soul of Thalia Grace herself, preserved in amber-like stasis by her father's desperate love. The awakening came like lightning, splitting the night sky, sudden, brilliant, and impossible to ignore. The pine's trunk began to shimmer and shift, its bark rippling like water disturbed by an unseen hand. Campers gathered in stunned silence as the tree's form wavered between wood and flesh, between plant and human, caught in a magical metamorphosis that defied every law of nature they thought they understood. The air crackled with electricity, and Percy felt his hair stand on end as the scent of ozone filled the afternoon air, heavy with the promise of storms. When the transformation finally completed itself, Thalia Grace stood before them once more, not as memory or legend, but as living, breathing reality. Her punk rock style remained unchanged by her years as bark and branch, her electric blue eyes sparking with confusion and power barely contained. Yet even as the camp erupted in celebration, Percy glimpsed something troubling in her expression, the weight of lost time, the disorientation of resurrection, and perhaps most ominously, the raw, untrained power of a daughter of Zeus who had been denied 7 years of learning to control her abilities. The fleece had given them back their protector, but in doing so, it had also unleashed forces that would ripple through the world of demigods in ways none of them could yet comprehend.